I'm attempting to complete every single Gamecube game, and I'm using a random number generator to pick the next game. Last episode, we were the best spy in the business in Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. In this episode, we're everyone's favorite space bounty hunter and playing Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes was released November 15th, 2004, and was developed and published by Nintendo. This game was extremely frustrating at times, but overall it was a good experience. Before we get started, make sure to like this video because it really helps out the channel, and subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of the future games. Without further ado, this is my experience with Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. In Metroid Prime 2, we're going to go through the single player to consider this one complete. The game opens with our spaceship getting caught in the gravity of a random planet, and we get sucked in and we end up crash landing on the surface. This is a really good cutscene to get the game moving, and the graphics look really good considering the time period of the game coming out. Our main character Samus emerges out of the top of the ship, and that begins our journey into the game. It's simple but makes sense while we're on the planet. If you didn't know what this game is, it plays like a first-person shooter. We can run around in each area of the map and shoot our laser gun attached to our suit. One of the cool things that this game allows us to do is scan objects in each environment and gives us more information about it. This ability will come to good use later in the game. A Metroid-style game has you going back and forth into areas to achieve a little more each time when you unlock new abilities. This game isn't as big as on the backtracking as some of the earlier games in the series, but getting new equipment and skills are needed to advance in the current area you're in. We will go over each one of these abilities and equipment as we come across it in our adventure. Some of the first skills that we are given are the abilities to turn into a ball to roll around the area, and you can shoot an energy ball at your enemies and doors to either kill the enemies or to open the doors that are just baby blue for right now. We get add-ons to these as the game goes, but these are the basic skills you start with. Using the scanner on your suit will allow for you to open doors sometimes as well. This allows for us to get further into the world. In each area you can find a map to help navigate through the different areas of that section. I used this feature a ton during my playthrough of this game because I always got lost. I want to point out that I didn't realize I could lock the scaling of the game. So throughout this, the screen's going to get bigger and smaller, and I want to apologize for this. We can also lock ourselves in place and move our aim so that we can look fully around the screen in a 3D form. I would compare this to looking down the scopes of a gun in any other FPS. The morph ball will let us lay little bombs that will allow us to jump when we're in the form of a ball. We can use this to unlock doors, get into other areas of the map, and sometimes even take down enemies. It doesn't always work the way I wanted it to, but overall it's a well-made feature of the game. We finally got to our first enemies of the game, and they're super easy, but I wanted to include it because a lot of this video is going to be about boss fights, story elements, and new equipment from here on out. We make our way out into the Grand Temple and encounter our first boss of the game. Each boss fight starts with a cutscene, and usually they're super good. I also want to mention here that there isn't an autosave feature in this game, so if you die during a fight, you have to start back to the most recent save. This would haunt me a lot in this game. One, because I was too lazy to go back and save, or I would start a boss fight without realizing it was going to be a boss fight. Before we fight the first boss of the game, we stumble across Dark Samus. It's a copy of us, but it is scary and evil. She's usually just trying to block us from getting to the next area, or trying to just straight up kill us. No in between. We'll be seeing her again soon, don't worry. We chase her down after we first see her and get sent to the dark version of the world. This area hurts us without having a suit that can deal with it. So at the beginning of the game, we have to use these bubbles to keep ourselves safe from damage that it will do over time. This was a pain sometimes, but we could get through it. These little portals scattered around the map are save points. I wanted to show one so everyone could see how they look in case you were curious. The first major area we arrive in is the temple grounds. It's going to be like the main area. We're going to be going back into this area quite often. It's almost like the hub of the world. That would be the best way that I could explain it. This leads us to all the dungeons in the game, leads us to the main alien we interact with during the game, so it really is just like the hub. Now we can move the story along. We find an abandoned ship with a bunch of dead soldiers laying around. We get a little cutscene here that explains that they were attacked when they arrived by the darkness, and they weren't able to save themselves. We even get to see what happened, and it's a massacre. The soldiers never stood a chance during this fight. Rest in peace, soldiers. This gives us our first equipment outside of the basic ones. We get missiles here. Missiles do massive damage to enemies and even allows us to open doors that are colored red when you shoot them with a missile. After shooting our ball form to crack a wall and get a little further into the area, we come across a giant elevator that takes us up. This thing moves so fast, I do not know how Samus can stay standing straight up when it's moving. The elevator takes us to the Great Temple, the area where we're going to have to return to talk to our main alien friend. Once we get to the top, we get our first boss fight of the game. Well, the first boss we actually take down. It's a 2-phase boss fight, and the first part isn't that bad. It's a giant bug-like creature that charges at you, but almost always returns to the middle of this circle that we're fighting in. It's a pretty easy first phase, dodge out of the way, shoot it with the charge beam shot, move on. It's the second phase that turns into the Dark Alpha Splinter. It's the darkness taking over the bug and making it a little bit faster and a bit stronger, but the moves don't really change, so it's just more of the same. This is a good introduction boss that allows you to kind of get used to how battling bosses is going to work, because everything's kind of done in an arena. Once we kill the boss, we get a cutscene showing it dying. We find a glowing blue orb and it fuses into our suit. It tells us at this point that it doesn't do anything and it's not a threat to us. After that, we go to the top of the temple and find our main alien friend, Umos. He's going to be the character that tells us what we need to do from here on out, just giving us some sort of navigation on where to go. He also explains the darkness to us and asks us to help save their planet from the darkness. There's a lot of cutscenes early in this game, which made the beginning of the game a bit slow. I wanted to point out that there are capsules around the world that are blue, and if you collect them, you get another full bar of health. These are very important to collect. It makes the game much easier when you have more of them. I needed them because I am not great at FPS style games. They're called energy tanks, and I'm not sure how many total are in the game. But I found at least 6 of them when playing, so maybe 6, maybe more. We also find missile expansions. These are more common, but allows us to hold more missiles. Each one of them gives you the ability to carry 5 more missiles with you. I think I ended the game being able to hold 145 missiles, which still did not feel like enough. On to the first major dungeon of the game. There are 3 of these in total, and they're all themed differently. The first one is called Agon Waste, and it reminds me of a giant desert mixed with a science center. The first enemy I came across in this area was a centipede-like creature that takes a bit to take down. I wanted to give a feel for how this area was designed and not just rush into the boss fights. We move further into the level and get a cutscene where we finally meet the space pirates. These have different forms, which we'll come across later in the game. They're not very difficult, but I thought it would be important to see because they're a big part of the game as you progress from here on out. Now on to the next boss fight. It's a centipede that gets the darkness infused into it. This boss is called the Bomb Guardian. The tactics for this boss fight is to shoot the butt of the centipede where it has a glowing point. This is very much Nintendo, because if I recall, a lot of Nintendo bosses have this very same weakness. After completing this boss fight, we get a new skill for our Morph Ball, called the Morph Ball Bomb. This is the only skill that I can't remember what it does exactly, because we already have explosion kind of things going on before this, but I'm not really sure. We meet a hologram of an alien called Aisha, or Aisha, I think it's Aisha, that tells us about returning the light to the Agon Waste. He also grants us the ability to unlock doors that have yellow writing on them. After talking to Aisha, we head back to the Dark Ether world. This area has these bubbles that we still have to use. I never really found that the darkness was what killed me. The enemies in these areas didn't help, because you're always losing health. But I digress. On to the next boss fight for Agon Waste. It's a giant alien thing called Jump Guardian. This boss fight is super easy, and I'm going to just glide over it. You stay in the bubble, you shoot it with the laser gun and missiles. The Jump Guardian will charge to knock you out of the bubble, but it's easy to avoid. And once he's out of health, that's it. It's very easy. After we defeat him, he drops the ability to double jump. This is a much needed ability to get further in both the temple grounds and the Agon Waste. It was about time we got this ability. For each dungeon, we have to find 3 dark temple keys. We need 3 of these to get to the final boss of the dungeon. Sometimes these are right in the open, and sometimes you have to solve a puzzle to get to them. After this boss fight and collecting the key, we run into our friend Dark Summus again. Nothing really happens here, but moments later we find Dark Summus again and she wants to fight. This fight isn't that bad. She's quick moving, but she doesn't really hit all that hard. The later fights with her get much more frustrating, and I started to not look forward to them. Once she's defeated, we get this cutscene where she explodes and causes the room to get destroyed. I want to mention that the cutscenes in this game are very good. I think they aged better than most GameCube games that I've played so far in this challenge. We also get the ability to shoot dark beams after this. Certain enemies take more damage, and some doors will only open using darkness. I somehow lost footage somewhere because I also collected the light beam ability for the gun, which does the same thing, but is the light version. I also collected the other 2 dark temple keys. I don't know what happened with the footage. I'm really sorry. Just know that we collected those before we got to this part. But when I get footage again, we return all 3 keys in the Dark Temple to challenge the final boss of the dungeon. We get a good cutscene to display the boss known as Amorbus. It's a giant sandworm that we have to shoot with the light and dark beams to get his horns to come off. Once the horns come off, it tries to suck you up, so you turn into the morph ball and you let it suck you up. Once you're inside, you lay a bomb and it does major damage. During this boss fight, the worm goes from having 1 head to having 2 heads, and then in its final form it has 3 heads. You just have to do it 1, 2, 3 times. Not too bad. It makes it a little more difficult, I guess, but not really. Once we get Amorbus's health all the way down, it shrinks all the way back to the normal size and dissolves into the world. Then we get new equipment. It's a suit that can handle being in the dark ether better, which means we don't take as much damage when we're outside of the bubbles. We continue further into the dungeon and retrieve the dark light from dark ether. We absorb it into our gun somehow. Don't know how this works. Please explain this to me. You take this giant ball of light and you suck it into your forearm. Then we go back to the normal world, run all the way back to where we found Aisha, and put the light in the same machine, but in the light ether world. We'll have to do this a total of 3 times in the game. After returning the light to the machine, we have to go visit our friend Umos again. He thanks us for helping get the first light back, and then gives us information about getting the next light from a new dungeon. He's a good dude. I like this character a lot. On to the second major dungeon of the game. This one is themed around a swampy area and a lot of water related parts. This dungeon is called Torvis Bog. In this area, we can walk underwater. This adds some puzzle elements and some new enemy types for us to deal with. Also, our field of view isn't the greatest when we're underwater, and we move much slower. This gives us a big disadvantage. The first piece of equipment we get in this area is the add-on to the missile launcher. It allows us to charge up and shoot 1 mega missile to do massive damage. It also lets us open up green doors in the dungeon. You wouldn't be able to access these before finding this ability. As per usual, we find a hologram of a fallen alien by the name of Avog, and he tells us about the dungeon and grants us the ability to open doors with green writing on them. What a nice guy. On to the first boss fight in the game that involves using the morph ball to deal with it. It's the same boss fight that we had before with the Jump Guardian, but this one is called the Boost Guardian. He'll turn himself into a ball and charge around the arena to attack us. We have to avoid these attacks in our ball form, and when he comes out, shoot him with missiles and lasers. Once we defeat him, he drops the new skill for the morph ball that allows for us to do a boost attack. just like he was doing. It's called the boost ball skill. This allows us to ramp up objects and take down certain types of enemies that have armor or a specific point that has to be attacked to do damage to them. Right out of the Boost Guardians arena, we have some ramps that we can boost up and get the first Dark Temple key for the Torvis Bog. Next, we have to solve this spinning puzzle where we have to spin the ground around to get the image to line up. We use the new boost skills to move the platforms. Once the puzzle is complete, we get another new upgrade called the Seeker Launcher. The Seeker Launcher lets us lock onto multiple targets at the same time and shoot dark energy at them. This also lets us unlock the purple doors that we didn't have access to. Right after this, we get another new skill called the Dark Burst, which lets us charge the dark energy beam and do more damage with it, just like with the missiles. I know this is a lot of skills, one right after another, but we get a new equipment now. This new equipment is a jetpack that lets us shoot upwards in the water in the bog. We move more quickly as we're going around the dungeon. I love having this thing on my back. It's called the Gravity Boost, if anyone was wondering, but it's a jetpack. As soon as we get to the Gravity Boost, we get attacked by the next main boss in the game. Not the final boss of the dungeon, but the first boss that I had some issues with. The boss is called the Alpha Blog. This thing reminds me of a shark if its face got mutated into one giant mouth. I found this boss fight on the harder side because he charges at you, and that's when you can do damage to him. Only when his mouth is open, and then you have to dodge out of the way right after it. I died like 3 times before I got the hang of this boss. He can also shoot things at you. I didn't even really notice them, so they're not all that bad to avoid. Once we took a beating for a while, we were able to take him down, and somehow he was connected to the fans in the room. So when he died, they turned off and the water drained. If I had an explanation for this, I would give it to you, but I have no idea how the two things relate. As we leave the arena we're fighting in, we get our second Dark Temple key. Only one more to go in the Torvis Bog. Is everyone ready for the next boss fight? I told you this video was going to turn into a boss rush once we covered the major areas of the game. The next boss is a walking dinosaur thing that can shoot electric from his horn. It's called the Grapple Guardian. If you didn't catch on to the theme, each Guardian gives us an important ability to progress further into the map. This fight is weird, and you can't do damage until you scan the Guardian, because it lets you know about its weak point, which is his eye. If you shoot him in the eye, it will stun him, and then he'll shoot this grapple at you. If you use the electricity poles in the room and he hits them, he'll get stuck for a bit, and you can circle around him and hit him in his weak spot on his butt. He's too quick to do this normally, so that's why you have to do it this way. That's only phase 1 of the boss fight though. Once you trigger phase 2, the electric poles no longer hold him in place, so you have to use some skills and missiles to brute force your way through the rest of his health. One of the more in-depth boss fights in the game. We did get him down after a couple tries. Once he's down, we get new equipment. You guessed it, the grapple beam. This allows for us to grapple these points throughout the world and swing across gaps with it. This opens a bunch of new areas in the game because we don't have to jump to get to them, and then we wouldn't make it anyway. We grapple out of the room right after this, and we find the final Dark Temple key by using our new grapple beam. Now we have all of them and can head to the final boss of the dungeon. We head over to the area to return all 3 Dark Temple keys and unlock the door to the final boss of the dungeon. This boss fight is a 2-phase boss fight, and each phase is really different. The room we're in fills up with dark ooze water, and we have to shoot a giant cocoon off the wall of the room to start the boss fight. The cocoon falls into the water, and the beginning of the first phase starts. A giant larva comes out of the cocoon and starts to swim around the platform we're on. The larva will jump out of the water, and you have to shoot it while it's in the air. The first stage is called Chikra larva. I think that's how you say that word. I don't know. The larva will eventually get onto the platform, and you'll have to unload on it with the light beam gun. Outside of it shooting rings of ooze at you and the little enemies it spawns, this stage of the boss fight isn't that difficult. Once you take it down, you get this cutscene that makes it appear like it's dead. and that we finished the whole boss fight. Next up is Chikra Adult. This thing reminds me of the giant, like, dragonfly or something. It flies around and shoots you with poison. You must avoid this and use the grapple beam to get behind him and shoot its wings with 4 missiles in 4 specific spots. After that part, it shoots small enemies at you and even has a quick poison sack that it shoots at you. You can shoot it freely at this point and just have to avoid its shots that will knock you into the ooze. The boss fight isn't that hard once you get the technique down on how to hit and move. We finally take it down and get this cutscene where it finally dies. This somehow causes all the ooze to drain out of the room, just like the shark-like boss. I don't know how these events are connected, to be honest. I really don't. After this cutscene, we get a new upgrade for our suit called the Dark Visor. This will allow us to see invisible platforms placed in different areas around the world, and certain space pirates that go invisible. We can now see them and attack them even if they're invisible. This is a great upgrade for the suit and much needed heading into the future. We head into the room to collect the light from Dark Ether, as you do at the end of each dungeon, then immediately head over to the normal ether and return the light using the same machine. Now we have to go back to our friend Umos so he can tell us where the last light is being held and how to get it. He also allows us to unlock new doors. I think it's blue for this section. I can't really remember. On to the third dungeon of the game. It's a fortress and it's very high tech. It has machines that control the areas and turrets that pop out of the ceiling. This dungeon is called Sanctuary Fortress. It also sort of looks like an old oil rig or something. I don't really know how to describe it best. We find the most annoying enemy in the whole game next. It's like a walking spider that has a core hanging under it. You have to go into morph ball form and charge into it. And then its head pops off and you have to deal with that. It's kind of annoying. It took me forever to figure out how to take these down. Once you learn, they aren't that bad, but right here I was struggling because I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I could not figure this out. I also found my first ammo refill station in this level. I don't know if there were other ones in the other dungeons, but this is the first one I found. It gives you full ammo for all of your weapons. This was super helpful in this dungeon because there are a lot of enemies just scattered throughout the dungeon, and most of them take a lot of shots to take down. There is a part where we have to turn off this spinning core and you have to complete a puzzle to get it to shut off. I really like this part. You basically have to shoot it and just line up the line of colors with the shapes of colors. Oh, they all just have to match. It's easy, but I thought it was something to point out because I enjoyed it so much. We finally meet the hologram alien in this dungeon. His name is O'Liar, and he's blue. There's nothing new here. He tells us what we need to do, and we move on with the dungeon. On to another morph ball boss fight. This one was actually very challenging because the ball doesn't always respond the way I wanted it to. You have to find your way to the trigger to jump into it and set it off, so that the boss runs into these electrical cores and loses health. But if the boss hits you, it does major damage and there isn't really healing in this fight, so you need to be careful to complete all of the areas. The first area is pretty easy. Go around the outside and jump up and over to the spot. This boss is called the Spider Guardian, which means he's going to give us some ability or equipment to help us complete the dungeon. They always do when they're guardians of something. The next area is like a half pipe, and you have to jump your way to the top to get to the spot to set off the trap for the boss. This one requires some timing, but it wasn't that bad. The next area is similar to the previous one, but the spot is under the top platform, and you have to time your way down to not get hit by the boss. You also have to slow down the boss by hitting it with a bomb to activate the spot. It takes some getting used to, but once the timing is down, it isn't all that bad either. The last area has 3 spots you have to get, and it's a bunch of jumping up and then moving out of the way and hitting the boss to slow it down. It's actually pretty difficult, and I died here a few times, which is pretty frustrating because it's the last part of the boss fight. The first spot is on the second layer of the area. The second spot is at the top right on the third layer of the area, which takes some time to get up there. And the last spot is at the very top of the area, which takes timing to get done after hitting the boss. Look how low my health was when I finished this boss fight. I was so close to dying again. I only had 29 health left. I got lucky, I think. After defeating the boss, we move into the tunnel and get our next upgrade for the morph ball, called the spider ball. This allows us to move on the tracks on the wall. The arrow looking things. We can just roll on them. No more jumping around, trying to get up and down. I wish this ability came before the boss fight, but that's the end of the Spider Guardian boss fight. We go and get the map of the dungeon now. Like I said, these things help out so much when trying to figure out where you've been or where you need to go. With the new ability, we're able to grab our first Dark Temple key. Then we stumble across Dark Summits again. Who's ready for the next boss fight with her? This boss fight is similar to the first boss fight, but she can go invisible now, and we have to use the Dark Visor to attack her while she is. Outside of that, the boss fight is pretty simple. As long as you continue to avoid her and shoot her with charged laser beams and missiles, it's really not that bad. Once we defeat her, we get a cutscene where she falls out of a window and we have to chase her. It's like a scene from an action movie. Doesn't really fit with the rest of the game, but I like the change up here. Yet again, she falls and you're led to believe that she's dead. Wrong again! We climb to the top of the room and get our next ability for the suit, called the Echo Visor. This visor lets us see hidden noises that are being projected, and we can shoot and turn them off. This can unlock new areas, portals, or even missile and health upgrades. It's a neat little add-on for the visor. You don't use it all that much though. We find a room that was previously a dead end. We find that there are noise waves that open up the door that has a portal behind it. It takes us to the Dark Ether, and then we have to open the floor of that room using the Echo Visor again, and then onto another mini boss fight. I'm not sure if this is considered a boss fight, but it has steps to it like a boss fight. Basically, you use the new Spider Ball ability and follow a track in a circle, and have to jump across and hit the batteries that drop down. If you do, it destroys them. Once you do so many for each level, you move up to the next floor and do it again. There are these things that drop down that try to knock you down to the floor by design. If you fall to the floor, then it will electrocute you. This takes your health down super quick. I tried my best to not get knocked down, but it didn't really work that well at first. The second floor has gaps in the tracks, so you have to jump from side to side instead of just going in a circle. Yet again, once the batteries are gone, you move up to the third floor. The final floor has 3 gaps in the track and gives you a little room for error. Since this is the last floor, once you break a few of the small batteries, the main core drops down. And it's quick, so you have to be ready to hit it to destroy it. I think this is the hardest part of the boss fight, because it feels like the core drops down for a fraction of a second. Once the core is destroyed, the machine blows up, and that's the end of the mini boss fight. Then we can get to a door that we couldn't get to before the fight. You know what? I'm just going to call this a boss fight. This is a boss fight. We get to this big room where we have to turn these laser gun things at the middle receiver. There are 4 of them total, and they all have a switch like the spinning puzzle we did earlier to turn them. Get inside of the switch with the morph ball, blow it up until it's turned in the right position. Once that's done, we get our next ability, the one that I think everyone knows, the screw attack. This thing has been in Smash for years, but here it is in an actual Metroid game. This allows us to jump and screw attack to stay in the air for long periods of time. The timing is weird for this ability because you have to hit the B button at the right time to maintain the jump. But it makes things so easy. We grab another of the Dark Temple keys, which is the third one because yet again I don't have footage for the second Dark Temple key we got. Then we make our way to the Dark Ether to return them to the door. We give our keys and open the door for the final boss fight of the dungeon, and this one is something else. It has multiple phases, and overall it's more annoying than anything else. I didn't really enjoy this boss fight, but here we go. We take an elevator down into an arena with a massive robot. It looks like the annoying ones I was talking about at the beginning of this dungeon, and it's actually the same. It's the same thing. It eventually gets taken over by darkness, and now we have to fight it. This boss is called quadratics, and it has 3 phases. On to phase 1. The beginning of the fight has you avoid getting stomped on. You go into morph ball mode and boost into the red cores under each one of its feet. This part is easy. Next part of this phase has you shoot missiles at the flashing knees on the legs of the machine. They have to be flashing blue or it will not do any damage. Still not that hard, but it takes some time because you have to jump around to get a good shot on the knee that's flashing. That's the end of phase 1. We get a cutscene where the machine falls apart and the head of the machine starts flying around the room. This part requires us to use the echo visor and shoot the antenna in the middle of the body that's laying on the ground and shut down the communication to the head that's flying around shooting at us. Every time you do this, the head will drop a little version of the boss and you'll have to take them out, and then I think you do this a couple times. I still find these enemies super annoying. So I wasn't really having a great time with this boss fight, to be honest. Once you do this a few times, we get another cutscene showing that the head's casing over its brain breaks, and now we can do damage to it. This part is actually very easy, and I like this part of the boss fight. So basically the idea here is to shoot the head until it's stunned, and then it just flies away like it's drunk or something, and then you use the legs of the body with our spider ability and roll to the top. Once there, we boost off the ramp and we land on its brain. There are 2 holes in the brain that we can get into and drop a bomb inside, which will do massive damage. This needs to be done twice and it ends the boss fight. We get a cool cutscene where the head loses control and heads crash into the wall. Summit jumps out, does some flips, and then she just jetpacks down to the ground all safely. What a badass moment. We get another new piece of equipment right after this boss fight. It's an add-on to the beam gun that allows us to shoot both light and dark beams together, which turns them gray. This does massive damage to enemies. It will allow us to open gray colored doors, but uses a lot of ammo for both light and dark. So it needs to be saved for strong enemies or doorways. At least that's how I played. This is called the Annihilator, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's the Annihilator beam. We head into the room to collect the last dark ether light from the fortress, and then we go and return it to ether to bring back the last light that we're missing, or so we think anyways. We return to our friend Umos again, and he explains that there is one more energy controller holding the dark ether world together, and we have to go to the Sky Temple to take it out. But we need to collect 9 keys to gain access to it. He tells us that all 9 keys are hidden in the dark world and we'll have to go and find them all. He does have a surprise for us though, and uses the light we just collected to give us our final suit upgrade. The light suit. This suit allows for us to take no damage in the dark world, so we don't have to stay in bubbles anymore while in dark ether. We can also travel using beams of light around the world because this suit will protect us, I guess. Thanks, Umos. You're just a bro. We arrive at the entrance of the Sky Temple, and we have to scan everything to get hints about where the Sky Temple keys are in the world. This has you do a bunch of backtracking to areas we've already been in. I'm going to just do a montage here and just show me collecting them, because there isn't much new to talk about, and the areas are all places we've been already. So I'll meet you after we get all of them. collected all the keys and we returned to the entrance to the Sky Temple. And we return all the keys to the rightful spots. We take a beam of light to get there, and now we're on the final part of the game. The Sky Temple. It's not really a dungeon. It's a small area before a boss fight. That's about it. It just kind of looks like the main room of the Grand Temple, in my opinion. That's where the final boss of the game is. Ooh, scary! When we arrive, there is a giant dark energy ball that is taken away by what looks like an octopus. We travel through the one room of the temple and arrive in a room where the ball of energy is just hanging out. This is definitely a trap. This triggers a cutscene to show us the final boss of the game, Emperor Ing, another boss fight with multiple phases. In the first phase, it has octopus arms that we have to destroy so that it pops its head out. Once it does, it has a shield that goes around it, but there is a little opening that we can shoot our charged beam shots into that will cause damage to, I guess it's the head of the octopus. It's the only way to actually hurt it in the first phase. This isn't that bad other than avoiding the octopus arms when he spins them around the room. There isn't much room to move around, so it can be a little bit challenging. Once we defeat this phase, we get a cutscene where his head turns over into a ball. And you know what this means. We have to go into morph ball form and drop bombs into the holes on the ball. They really like adding this in boss fights in this game. These little tentacle things come out and they try to knock you off the ball, but overall this phase is pretty simple. Once we destroy all the holes, the ball explodes and out comes the final phase of the boss fight. It's his alien form. This part is where I struggled with this fight. During this fight, he'll shoot beams of energy at you that does damage and jump at you to physically attack you as well. The formula for this boss fight is easy, but timing can be difficult. His mouth glows orange when the fight begins, and you have to stun him by shooting him with laser beams and missiles. Once he's stunned, his mouth will either turn white or purple. If it's white, you shoot it with the dark beam. If his mouth is purple, you shoot it with the light beam. Seems easy enough, but you can only do damage by hitting his mouth. Not all angles will actually hit his mouth, so you'll have to jump around and time it. After a bit, he comes out of being stunned and you have to start all over again until he's dead. It's not that hard, but sometimes you get hit with everything or none of your shots will register when you're trying to shoot him. It's I don't know, it can be kind of tough. So this fight definitely did take me a handful of tries. Once he's defeated, we get a cutscene of him exploding and we collect the last bit of light energy to return to Ether. The game is finally done. Nope. Guess what? We have to escape now because the dark world is crumbling to pieces. We have 8 minutes to get out, which you're probably like, that's easy. It's like one room to exit. Bet you can't guess who's there waiting for us. That's right. Dark Samus again. But this time, she's lost control and she's extremely powerful. Her suit is transparent, we can see her weird alien face under the suit. The true final boss of the game is now. Dark Samus this time is a pain in the second phase of the fight. The beginning has us using the Echo Visor to do damage because we can't see her. And she moves super fast. Once we do enough damage in this form, she starts floating around and has like a ball of like blue energy around her, and she'll shoot these beams of blue energy at us. Some are big balls that we have to avoid, and others are just some of these small ones that come off of her. I don't know if they're like a discharge or something when she's using that ability, but we're supposed to absorb them into our laser gun and shoot them back at her. This was so hard for me because I didn't understand the absorbing part. I thought I had to wait for her to come back to normal and charge me to shoot her, but it didn't work. So I was getting extremely frustrated. I also didn't like that I was racing the clock to get it done. But finally, I figured out that you just shoot her while she's still shooting blue energy, and it will do a good amount of damage. After finally defeating her, we get another cutscene where she falls to the ground and she crawls towards you to shoot, trying to like grab a hold of you. But then she phases away right before she's able to touch you. Then she's finally dead. For good this time. Once she's done phasing away, a bunch of these dark spider creatures come after us and we have to escape. The world is falling apart and they're going after us. We run away to the portal and get out of the world, but it looks like they're going to escape with us. But the portal closes just in time. All the darkness is removed from the planet of Ether as we return the last bit of light to the temple. Sumish changes back into her normal suit. Umos and the other aliens all bow to us as we leave, and we wave goodbye. We get one last cutscene of us flying away on our ship, and that's the end of the game. Credits roll. I would definitely recommend this game, but just know you're going to get lost a bunch throughout the playthrough of this game. So maybe use a guide, or you just prepare for longer than the average gameplay for it. If you want to know what game is next, stick around, but if not, thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Alright, so we finished Metroid Prime 2, and we are going to pick our next game. We got our list up. We got a random number generator. We have 555 left. So on the count of 3, we're going to find out what we're playing next. 1, 2, 3. 376. Which is Rayman Arena. I'm not really sure I've ever played this. It's a multiplayer party game. So I'll have to look into it, see kind of what the idea of beating that is. But yeah. So that's what we're playing next. Rayman Arena.